even think of HTML.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Selling the Experience. Thank you for coming. And I think we're going to have a very interesting conversation over the course of the next hour and a half. Hour and 15 minutes, really. My name is Surya Vanka, and I have the pleasure of moderating this. I have four extremely distinguished people on this panel who all have got a lot of experience and are really superstars in the industry. So this is going to be a lot of fun. Just a few logistics before we get started off. We're going to do this panel in an interesting way. So we're going to try to break this up into three different chunks, as it were. So we'll begin with an opening statement from each of the panelists, just talking about their area of passion, where user experience is, the value of user experience and so on. And I've left it very open about what they want to actually explore in that opening statement. From then, we'll go on to a few questions following up on their open statement, and then we'll have plenty of time in the last part for you to throw questions our way. Okay. So just briefly to introduce the folks. Fortunately, MIX has a logo with a hand, and there are 5 of us. On the far end, we have Cordell. Cordell's from Frog Design. He'll tell you more. Each of them will tell you more in detail about themselves when they go into their opening statements. And we have Nathan from Fluid, and Roger Black Studio, Jay from Otapod, and my name is Surya, and I'm from Microsoft. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and jump into some of these opening remarks, and I'll hand this off to Cordell.
Thank you. So Frog Design is a strategic design consultancy agency, and we work on a very wide range of products. We design websites, we design web applications, desktop application user interface design. We do a lot of embedded GUI work on devices such as cell phones, portable media players, consumer electronics. We also have an industrial design practice, so we do human interface design and industrial design for hardware. And we've been at this for about 37 years. Design is our business, and it's the end product that we sell. So in terms of selling the value of design, that's something we do every day. We see design as a way to solve business problems. Most clients that come to us have some problem that they want us to address, and it usually involves money. They either want to get more of it, or they want to save it, or they want to gain market share. So we actually have a term for the type of work where there isn't any business objectives associated with design, and that's called fine art. So anytime that we start a project, we look at the project from 3 different perspectives. First of all, we look at what the business objectives are for the project, what our clients' end goals are for making money. The second thing we look at is what are the user requirements? So the people who are going to be using this product, what are their expectations? What are they going to use it for? What context are they going to use that product in? So we're defining the user requirements. And then the third thing we look at are the technical requirements, the technical feasibility. So if you look at all of these 3 things, business requirements, user requirements, technical feasibility, in terms of, imagine 3 circles in a Venn diagram. What we're looking for is the intersection where all of those come together. So that's the sweet spot. That's where we want the design solution to happen. So that means that the product's going to make money for our clients. It's going to be easy to use and satisfy the needs of their customers. And then it's also going to be technically possible to implement. So all of the products, or virtually all the products that we design, involve people. We may have done a few pet products, but most of the time we're dealing with people. And the one thing you should know about people is that we are all emotional beings. We're in an emotional state just about every waking hour. And emotions are very powerful. What we've found is that if you can tap in to people's emotions, design products that resonate with people emotionally, you've got a customer for life. So the design philosophy that we have used for many years at Frog is form follows emotion. So since this is a panel on selling design experience, emotions are probably as far away as you can get from things like cost-benefit trade-offs and return on investment analysis. So how does emotions help sell design? Well, there's a couple of things. One is, it's designing products that are emotionally resonant is more fun for us. We get a lot of satisfaction over seeing people who are using our products with a smile on their face. It's more fun for our users because they've got a satisfying experience. But the bottom line is that when you design a product that people love, you can charge a premium for it. And there's plenty of examples out there. I'm sure we can all think of some where technically or functionally products may not be the most advanced, but because of the design, people are able to charge a premium for it. And I'll give you an example of one of the products that we designed at Frog. You'll see two cell phones that we designed for Motorola. The phone on the left is the i830. That was one of Motorola's best sellers. It actually was featured on television shows like The Apprentice, got rave reviews, and it retails for about $180. When we designed this product, we actually designed it as a platform for Motorola, that they could take this platform and then do different versions of it. And one of the versions that we did of this phone was a baby fat version. So, and that's shown on the right here. Basically, the only difference between those two products is a little extra paint and a couple of plastic diamonds that go around the display. So, which cost about $1.25. So we took a $180 product, we added $1.25 in materials to it, and we're selling that product for $700, and that's flying off the shelves. Now, the reason that we could do that was, one, we designed the product in the first place to be able to tier it and change it for different markets. And the second thing we did when we designed the baby fat phone, we just honed in on a particular niche market that we knew was going to resonate with people. So that right there is a great example of the power of design.
So hi everyone, I'm Nathan Moody. I'm here from Fluid Incorporated. I think one of the interesting things about this panel, at least in as far as Frog and Autopod and Fluid, is that we're all similar in some ways, in that we all are kind of these integrated design and development shops, but each one of our companies has a pretty different focus. So unlike Frog, we don't necessarily design hardware. We have been in business since 1990, and we are pretty much, at this point, focusing on developing rich customer experiences for online retail. So our clients include the North Face, JanSport, Timberland, Reebok, and in the past we've done work for Avery Dennison, Charles Schwab, Microsoft, and a whole bunch of other folks. So one of the interesting things for me as a designer being involved in producing design for online retail is that your success is eminently measurable, because you're always basically designing towards increasing sales. And that's not always the primary metric. Sometimes it can be about developing a community. Sometimes it can be about site stickiness. Sometimes it can be about designing a site that might not necessarily sell anything, but vectors people to either other retailers or other retail channels. So for me, being able to point at a project like Timberland, and maybe I'll talk about that project in a little while, they used to have kind of a JavaScript-based way to configure your own custom boot. We designed a thick client application to do the same thing, and we almost tripled conversion in the space of about a fiscal quarter. And so being involved in designing for online retail has some really interesting benefits in terms of the measurability of your success, which of course, in the context of this panel, helps you show and demonstrate the value of your design work. These are some of the clients I was mentioning earlier. Another interesting thing about Fluid is that we're starting to get into developing our own products. and still focused in online retail, what we're starting to do now is trying to put the power of interactive and intelligent merchandising of products into the hands of our clients, and developing products that will allow someone to import their own database or even a spreadsheet of products, and then be able to add things like rotation and color change and zooming without us ever being involved. So basically building applications to spit out other little mini applications. And I think the final note I'll add about Fluid is that we're probably best known for our Flash development, but we tend to be pretty technology agnostic. And so you might have seen Andrew Sirotnik, who's our Chief Experience Officer at the Monday keynote, Darren David just next door, about an hour ago, gave a big demonstration on building an in-store kiosk for the North Face and Windows Presentation Foundation. And I think that it's really important as designers and developers and a community as a whole that we all need to just kind of look at technology not necessarily as a limitation, but really recommend technology and design approaches to our clients that will best solve those business needs that Cordell was just mentioning.
All right. Okay, my name is Roger Black, and I'm really probably the most old-fashioned of the people up here because I come from the print world, really from editorial or content-based stuff like Rolling Stone and the New York Times and Newsweek. And first became involved with Microsoft on the first redesign of MSNBC in the like 97 time frame, 96, 97, which was kind of a scarifying lesson for all of us. And but it immediately went to the #1 news site, so we did have some metrics. At that time, I was trying to apply lessons I learned in print to online, and since in terms of time spent, so much of the internet is reading, it seemed like that was a pretty good idea. Later we found that people were really into the kind of data point and factoid experience. They were weaving their own narrative on the web rather than paying much attention to yours. And some of this is convention, what I call Yahooization, but some of it is just the way the technology is today. And I think at this conference, we've heard about through what WPF can do on top of Vista. That's the first big inclination that our world is going to morph in a big way again. And I think that what's happening is that print and online are converging one more big notch. And some of this has to do with the work that Microsoft has been doing in terms of getting readability on the screen. Microsoft knew fairly early on what slowly dawned on most of us, that eventually the screens would be good enough so there would be like paper, and that eventually the technology would merge and it wouldn't make a whole lot of difference whether you were on paper or on the screen. And it's really just a question of distribution. And with everything being distributed over the internet, it's really gets back to the user or the customer or the reader. And so one of the big moves that they made was ClearType. And we haven't really seen the impact of ClearType on the web yet. In fact, typography is one of the great source spots of the web. But with WPF clients, and some of that you saw in some of the presentations here, that's changing. Another thing that a client could do in WPF is change the scrolling paradigm into just pages again, where you can just flip pages and read ClearType in pages for some period of time. And this actually is going to change the reading experience enormously. One of the things that they've done, and there was also a hint of that earlier in the sessions, is this thing called adaptive flow. Adaptive flow mode allows in a WPF client you to change, when you change the shape of the window according to a set of rules, the contours of the text or other elements in the client can change. And that is a very reassuring thing to happen. There's also a lot of portability in the sense that you can go offline in a much more convincing way to download a video or text or just into a flat XPS file that is then shippable as email. From a designer point of view, it gets back to the branding, the look and feel, which we can carry from one area like print into the web or vice versa. And that really was not possible before. Typically, and I'm not picking on anybody else here. These are two things that I did. One is the Houston Chronicle newspaper, and the other is Cron.com, which is a fairly successful regional news website. The newspaper looks like this. It has custom typefaces that were designed at the Font Bureau, which is one of my partnerships, and it's a Christian Schwartz typeface that colors the basic look of the page with Benton Gothic, which is really Franklin Gothic. But when you go to the web, and we were really proud of this website. It scores very well among U.S. newspapers. It has 7 times or 10 times the readership of the daily paper, which is actually quite a big 700,000 circulation on Sundays. It's not a small product. And yet, one had to be designed for the web, the experience, the conventions, the use of the web, and one had to be designed for the print. Now, there is a good overlap of the two. 90% of print customers go to the web at least once a month. That only represents 30% of the web traffic. But to my point of view, when you get down to reading, these things need to look more like each other. They need to work better together. And this, in fact, the data needs to come, or the text needs to come from the same databases to the same targets with very similar templates on print, online, and eventually in other media. So what can we do? And if we had a WPF client for the Houston Chronicle, we could take a front page story and run it on the web like this, except it's really not the web, it's a WPF client, with our own typefaces that get downloaded, that are converted into clear type, and you would have a reading experience that would be substantially more pleasant. The adaptive flow thing would allow us to move the target. Now, these are Microsoft internal examples, which are not designed the way, say, these guys would design them, but they're very interesting because you can take the same material and just according to a set of rules, transform it to a different size window. So this page goes down to this page fairly without any intervention. And the result of all of that is you get more page views, that people spend more time with your product. And this is all relates to advertising. So that's where the bottom line comes in this technology. We're going to get a more satisfying, more useful relationship with the customers. Our assets can move more quickly across these distribution media. So our costs go down, the audience goes up, and we keep a single brand rather than having to do 2 or 3.
Thanks, Roger.
Sure. So I'm Jay Wolf. I run the business of Otapod for its 3 founders. The founders are all trained architects, actually, who've turned to software design for excitement and to make a living. They, on a daily basis, operate as visual designers, software architects, and creative directors, and basically gave me the keys to the bus so that they could stay focused on the work. So I'm president. This is the studio. It's messy. It follows our line of work, the design business. There's about 20 people. They're all highly experienced. It's a really well-regarded, award-winning studio. We pay a lot of attention to staying small and maintaining the culture and our approach to our work. They're very technically savvy designers. We do a lot of very aggressive websites. We build interactive TV applications. We build content for next-generation mobile phones. But there's not an engineer on staff. We actually team up with different engineering teams depending on the technologies that we're building on. So it's a very design-focused group. And I'm going to talk a little bit about at least our view of user experience. I haven't written a book, or I'm not as well published as the other gentlemen on the panel. But when we think we have our own idea of what user experience is, and it's probably unique to Otapod and our particular focus. But we draw a lot upon, I will say, we draw a lot upon insight and inspiration. And there's even kind of a strong effort to avoid process in the studio. So what I'm going to do is actually, instead of explaining, I'm going to try to show you just a couple of projects very quickly as possible. And I apologize for having to run behind the panel here. But this is a project for Nike Soccer. It's representative of a lot of the things that we do at Otopod. You can see there's a lot going on. Basically, the premise is that in America, our children play soccer in really nicely groomed fields lined by SUVs in the suburbs. And soccer is really a dirt sport. Soccer is a sport that is woven into the cultures of many other countries and societies. So we strapped on a couple of handheld cameras, went down to Brazil, and shot as much street soccer as we could find and create with Nike's help. And we find all kinds of opportunities where the culture and the sport have been woven together. And we present that here in a way that's really all about discovery. It's all about, it's not about selling product as much as it's about discovery, it's about understanding the essence of the sport, and it's about being there. And I was going to switch back to there. Another campaign that we work on is Nike's Wear Yellow. It's a fantastic opportunity for us. It's a beautiful campaign. Of course, Lance is winning everything. Nike's putting beautiful ads on television. And we're getting to play along. Of course, there's product tied to most everything we do, whether it's Nike Skate or Nike Soccer or Nike Cycling. There is, this obviously ties to choosing your shoe. You can buy sunglasses and watches to go with it, what have you. The thing we learned about in this particular project, again, a year ago, is that participation is critically important. And if you give the users the opportunity to participate, they will. This, in particular, is a small flash widget that was really added at the end of our development of wearyellow.com. It allows a person to come on, put their name, their hometown, and their affiliation with the campaign up for other people to view. So you're able to add yourself to the peloton, that group of cyclists that ride behind the leader. And so at the very top, there's a collection of dots you can see. Well, far out front on the left-hand side is Lance, and he's out on the front of the road here somewhere. If you scrolled to him, you could find him. You can also go back to the date that you participated in this, found this, and added yourself, and find your jersey color and your stats again. You can basically find yourself. So whether you are a cancer survivor, or there's cancer in your family, or you're just a cycling fan and a fan of Lance, you were able to post how you were connected and then send it to 10 of your friends. And Nike asked us to build this and was expecting that 15 to maybe 20,000 really avid cycling fans, or really avid Lance fans might join this little viral piece and send it on. We had to rebuild it when it hit 100,000 because it was crashing, of course, and it topped out at 300,000 registrations. And in fact, this yellow armband was downloadable as your icon, your instant messenger icon. We had 1 million downloads of that little icon in 4 days. So there was a lot of activity, and we learned that participation was really critical to the user experience, in at least the way we were operating with these brands, and kind of expect it, pretty much everything we do anymore, we consider the aspect of user participation. So I'm going to switch to, I'm going to point out that when I was first invited to be on this panel, I actually was concerned that maybe what we did wasn't relevant because, you know, we're kind of all about marketing-driven, brand-heavy websites. And I was assuming that this audience was more about productivity and application development. But the two are converging. As the technology improves, the product managers of our clients and the application developers are starting to expect that their applications work more and more like our kind of, you know, all-consuming software marketing sites. And they expect that the experience with those applications is just as compelling. So this is a website that kind of changed my mind. We just launched SpikeTV.com for MTV Networks. As you can see, there's a lot going on here. There's actually 5 content management systems feeding this. There is 2 ad servers. The background changes depending on what show is on. Currently on television in your time zone. So when you go to the website, there's a connection. Well, there's a lot going on. As I was saying, I'll put the Vegas away. There's kind of an intense or very complex and detailed show schedule. There's interstitials to make up for a little bit of the advertising that was lost at the bottom. And then you've seen this, everyone's seen this by now, this kind of ever-present, persistent video player. And actually what you're viewing in the site drives which shows you click on and which shows you show interest in drive the video queue for that video player. So it actually it'll queue up promos for other shows that are relevant and even advertising that's playing during those time slots. So again, a lot going on this website, and it really showed me that application development and what we do at Otopod, along with the demand of our kind of intense demand of our clients, those two are converging. I'm going to switch back. So I'll leave you with 2 things. I'll just leave you with this. The more that PCs act like TVs, and the more TVs pretend to be interactive, the greater this demand for convergence. The greater the demand for the kind of the critical nature of user experience, and the greater the demand for the experience across all platforms to be equally compelling. And I bring this mobile slide up just to point out the fact that users are starting to be less and less forgiving. Like, they don't care what technology they're on. They don't care what screen they're looking at. They expect their experience with your brand and your content to be as good everywhere. So we pay a lot of attention to that, and we actually, kind of feel privileged because the technology under all of this is changing so fast. And it's just changing constantly. And the user experience is the layer that we get to focus on, where there might be kind of a consistent thread, consistency and the opportunity to kind of satisfy and engage the user. So.
Cool. Great. Thanks, Jay.
You bet.
So you've heard 4 diverse points of view from all folks who are working sort of on the forefront of design in the consulting world. I'm going to present a slightly different view, and this is user experience at Microsoft. So it's more of a corporate world. As you can tell, because you're at the first conference that Microsoft ever hosted aimed really at designers, and a significant number of folks here are designers. The value of experience has changed at Microsoft. I've been at Microsoft for about 8 years. When I came to Microsoft, there were under 30 designers at Microsoft, or people working in user experience. Today, they're over 600, right? It's just growing exponentially. And the value of experience to the company is something quite different. It's gone from being something that was a luxury to something that we see as being really critical to our future. It is something that we're investing a lot towards, and you've seen this through panels and talks throughout the day. So a key question in any setting, and in a corporate setting, particularly in a large software company with a long history of being an engineering-driven company, a technology-driven company, is really who defines the experience? How do you get to define the experience? So I ask designers this all the time: who defines the experience? Isn't it you? You're the designer. You're the define the experience. And I hear a bunch of viewpoints. I hear folks say, I'm the designer, but they're really people who are called program managers. They're in control. They're managing the program. They own the vision. They own the delivery. And they limit what I do because, they're really in control. And they set the bounding box within which I can define the user experience. So then I go speak to the program managers. Sometimes say, so do you folks design the experience? And they say, no. It's the developers who are in control because they're the folks who know how to build the stuff. So they're the ones who are in control, and they're the ones who define the experience. And if you go to the developer and ask them, they say, no, it's not us, it's the managers. The managers decide what kind of products we're going to ship, what's the cycle we're going to ship in, and so they control what's possible in the experience. And then if you go to a manager, the manager says, no, it's my VP. It's the vice president who decides this is the strategic direction we go in, and that's the bounding box within experience the customers can be defined. And if you walked up to the VPs and said, so you're the guys behind defining how the Microsoft experience of our products is going, they're going to say, no, it's Bill and Steve. No, they're the ones who are setting the direction, and it's what Bill and Steve say. That's the people who define the experience. And if you got a chance to sit down with Bill and Steve over a cup of coffee, they say, no, it's not us, it's the board of directors, because they're guiding the company. And guess what? The board of directors, they think it's our shareholders. They're the folks we are really trying to, they're trying to keep them happy, and they're trying to make sure that we're building the right kind of products. And if you were to go to a shareholder, and some of folks here, it's really customers. It's our customers who are really in control, and they're the ones who are finally guiding us and driving us to define the experience. So it's really a lot of people in charge of the experience. So it's not just designers, it's a whole bunch of people. So it's all of us within Microsoft and within the ecosystem that we have to operate in who are guiding the experience in different ways. So then coming back to the designer, the person whose business card it says user experience designer, the person in charge of designing the experience, when I speak to them, one of the things I try to reinforce is really about being in control. And being in control is not about being anointed the responsibility and said, you can make the decisions, but it's about leadership. It's about leadership. And the reason I talk about this, I think this is wider than my own experience at Microsoft. It is about leadership. And this is what you're also hearing the panel from all of these folks. It's really about bringing leadership, right? Most often, when the folks who are in charge of the experience are also hopelessly outnumbered. At Microsoft, there's one designer for every 42 developers, right? There's a designer for every 38 program managers. So it is in helping make the user experience improve, regardless of whether one goes into a company and engages or whether it's within a company. It's about working a leverage model. It's understanding what is the whole cycle by which products get built and providing leadership at those stages. And typically for designers, it is, if we go through the understanding stage, it is being able to provide that insight by being directly in touch with users to say, oh, that's a real user need. It's when we move into envisioning and blueprinting things, it is to be able to say, aha, here's an interesting other way of solving the problem. Here's another way to meet a customer need. Is another insight, another creative slant. And then when it's actually blueprinting and implementing a product, it is really the wow, right? And that's so there. To recap, I think it's really user experience is everybody's business, and there's a unique role for designers to participate with others to make this happen. So having said that, it's about inspiration, and I want to go ahead to our panel and explore some of these issues and also take questions from you folks. But I'm going to, since I get to stand here with the mic, I'm going to start by asking some questions. I'm going to start with a question for Roger. Roger, you're clearly very passionate about the reading experience, and you're talking, what I heard you talk about was there's a paradigm shift. going on in the way the online reading experience is improving. Does this mean that newspapers will go away and that we shift to reading online?
Well, I'm not sure that the two are entirely linked. I think that newspapers may go away, but that will be because of a business failure of their own. I'm currently consulting 2 large newspapers, and I went to them with their 2 big problems. One is, if you're going to start a new newspaper today, what would it be? And then the second one is, how do you get from your organization today to that? And almost nobody could tell you the answer to the second, but almost everybody has an idea about the first, whether it's doing citizen news or whether it's completely merging the web and the newsroom operation.
So it's more integrated strategy.
There are huge kind of business problems in the sense that the news media, like all the media, like the music business or Hollywood or broadcast television, everything is in a kind of free fall due to the accumulation of hundreds of thousands of channels of information that people have time for. We're seeing television viewership go down. We're seeing newspapers circulation go down. They're all in a near panic. And yet nobody has really said that, you know, there won't be good songs or there won't be news or that people won't need some of these things. It's just a question of how you're going to deliver them. What Microsoft has done in the advanced reading group, which some people are here from, I don't even know if that's what it's called anymore. I mentioned that to a friend in New York, Terry McDonald, the editor of Sports Illustrated. I said, I'm going to meet with the advanced reading group at Microsoft, and he said, isn't that what we were in the 2nd grade? But there has been this interesting thing that's happened around the whole ClearType, well, first TrueType and then ClearType development at Microsoft, and then the Microsoft Reader, and the whole notion of what is it that people need with reading. And as I mentioned before, I think there are people at Microsoft who understood early on that the actual delivery mechanism, whether it's a screen or it's electronic ink on paper or whatever it becomes, will converge. The question is, what are they going to read and how do you get them to read it?
And how compelling is that experience, right?
Yeah. And that, I think of newspapers, to go back to your little story about who's in charge, I actually do think the readers are in charge or the customers are in charge. I think the designer's role is to be the proxy for the customer. That if I can figure out what the readers really want, then I can make something that they will read. And whether it's delivered online or on television or it's faxed to them or however it happens, it doesn't really matter. I think that newspapers will continue. I think that the current crowd doesn't make it. People will start new ones.
Right. So here you're saying, someone here is saying, it's the customers, in the case of the newspapers, they're asking for a more compelling experience, and that's one of the drivers, right? Cordell, talking about the compelling experience, I was quite taken in by your slide of form follows emotion. I know Frog has been a pioneer in following that direction. How do you take something so intangible as emotional desire and weave it into obviously a process you have where you've got a limited time, a limited budget to deliver something to your client? Is there some way that you build the consideration of emotion into your process at Frog?
Yeah, it's actually a very integral part of our process, and we found you can just learn a lot just by watching people. And so on every project, we'll find some way to go out and observe the people that we're designing the products for and talk with them. We found that you can't just ask people what they want or interview them, because a lot of times what they say and what they actually need or want are 2 different things, either because they can't articulate that or they don't want to tell you. So we have a number of techniques that we use going out in the field, observing people in their natural habitat, that we can then draw insights into not just what they're going to be using the product for, but how they feel about using that product, how they feel about the task that they're going to be performing while they're using that product. And then we feed that back into the design process. And we'll do that throughout the design process. Very early up front, it's more exploratory. Once we start having designs, we can bring people back into that process and test them out through, through techniques like usability testing or participative design. But we found that really having people, the actual users of the products, involved in the design process is really critical.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of one of the, you're touching on something that I heard as a theme through a panel, the changing role of the designer, as it were, right? Here, the designer you describe is a little bit ethnographer, right, a little bit researcher. It's not the old designer who, and I heard that from you, Nathan, as well. When you talked about the designer is the brand steward, is the technically savvy brand steward, particularly the web presence. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit more about this changing role, as it were?
Sure. At Fluid, I run the creative department there, and we have a lot of, it's interesting because our engineering department is just an engineering department full of extremely smart people, but the creative department has a lot of different sub-disciplines. We have interaction design, information architecture, visual design, motion graphic design. We actually even include building out the presentation layer as part of our creative group as opposed to part of our developer group. Mm-hmm. In terms of handling brand, Jay made some really good statements about how important brand is, and I think that for us, a lot of our clients, about half of our clients don't have brick and mortar equivalents, and the other half do. So when you're going to talk about the user experience and either developing a new brand online or extending an existing brand online or digitally, I think that it's really important to realize that the user experience, to a large extent, is the brand. So if you go to, how many websites offer a mapping experience? Google, Yahoo, MapQuest, etc. I was just at South by Southwest, and there was a show of hands of how many people here use MapQuest? One hand went up. How many people here use Google Maps? Everybody's hand went up. Yahoo, half and half. Then we talked about map mashups and stuff like that. But I thought that was really interesting because MapQuest was, you could probably argue, was kind of first to market with that kind of service. Mm-hmm. But it was Google who, through very savvy uses of technology and kind of extending their own brand of just utter minimalism and just putting raw power in the hands of the user, albeit not always obvious, which I have some issues with, that they wound up becoming the market leader. Also, for example, another good example is how this ties into some of the stuff that Cordell was talking about observing users and understanding how they feel about a product or feel about a service or feel about a series of tasks. And you can never test too early or too often, whether that's market research, more centered on the brand, whether it's usability research, because usability always tends to be like introduced after a certain number of steps of design have already happened. And a lot of the time, the problem in doing that is that you get that feedback from your core users way too late to enact potentially just core alterations in your design concepts. So another example is we are doing a lot of configurators these days for whatever reason. And the two big configurators we released recently was we did one for Timberland, which I mentioned earlier, and we launched this other site called rbkcustom.com for Reebok. And they're both basically the same thing, allowing the user to customize footwear. So the design of the shoe is largely set, plus or minus a few add-ons, but you can colorize every component and so forth. And in doing, in working closely with our clients and understanding their brand, understanding their customers, these two products that do the exact same thing feel incredibly different. Timberland really is a structured experience, 4 numbered steps. You have to finish one step before the next, and there's a high level of abstraction. So sure, the upper of your shoe might actually contain 4 parts, but in the UI we consider it 1. Mm-hmm. Very quick, very easy for a very diverse user base.
Right.
And with Reebok caters very specifically to the whole sneaker freak subculture, where people will spend an inordinate amount of money, most of their disposable income, on collecting unique or custom shoes or limited edition shoes. So we worked with our client, got a hold of a lot of their users, and they were all about, show us the complexity. Give me fine levels of detail. Don't talk down to me. I've used computers since I was 6. It's okay to expose all that to me. So the Reebok experience extends their brand of authenticity and individuality, and really much more targeted towards urban youth by having a user experience that was not a 1, 2, 3, 4 sequence of steps. You can do any step in any order. If you go to Timberland.com/custom boots, one word, very explanatory, lots of text, lots of on-screen hand-holding. If you go to rbkcustom.com, almost completely no text, very exploratory. And that's just one example of how understanding, obviously you have to understand the business case and the business needs of your clients, but you must absolutely get a very good handle on what the user wants in terms of a product or service, how they emotionally and intellectually connect to that product or service, which is effectively the brand, and then taking those brand attributes and weaving that into your work to have a product or service that is highly brand relevant and speaks to the right audience for the right reasons.
And when you're talking about, the role of the designer, being able to understand these subcultures very deeply through whatever method, it is not some kind of boundary case of what designers do. It is really something that all designers need to do today. And I think with another thread that I hear going through the panel is this emergence of new ways of doing design as well. There's not one way of doing design, just as the designer role is changing. I've got a question for Jay in that regard. I know we've talked a little bit about the process that Autopod follows, right? And it was quite evident in the Nike soccer in Brazil, as well as sort of the approach you talked about, that in some ways you folks are talking about an anti-method way of doing design, where you refuse to use the same design process over and over again, which goes completely against the grain of sort of the classical design method of, you define and then you try different variations and you refine one and so on.
Right. Well, I should first qualify that. There is a strong move against process at Autopod, but as the person responsible for scaling the company, there's some things you don't want to have to invent over and over again. So I sometimes tease them that they do have a process. It's just that the first step is to pretend they don't have one. That being said, it's really important to them that they continue believing that they don't have a process. And it's important in a couple of ways to the team. One is they hire very talented folks who are already successful, and they don't want our process to impose some new limitation on the way these other designers and architects work. So that's important. Secondly, it's important to recognize that the user we were designing for yesterday may not be the user that we're designing for today. Like, a process is in place to reliably repeat success and to be able to run that machine over and over again. So with the technology changing under our feet, with the user's appetites changing, constantly, we take the approach anyway, or maintain the belief that we have to start from scratch every time and actually design the process, or design our approach to each project as the first step in the actual design challenge. So the approach itself is actually regarded as a design challenge.
That's great.
Yeah.
Great. So folks, I want to invite anyone who would like to ask a question to please walk up to the mic, say your name, and if you are directing the question to somebody, please.
Yeah, I'm Gwydion Sullivan, Director of Strategy for 3 Spot Media in DC. It's nice to meet you all. I'm glad to hear a lot of talk about brand. It's sort of a black hole for our clients. We do a lot of high-profile work, and we can have some really intensely difficult conversations with people who ought to know better about brand. But one thing I'm sensing here that's a little bit of a disconnect is between understanding brand attributes and brand promise, which are fundamental. We see a triangle too. We have to understand business goals and objectives, the tactical situation, the audience and their needs, and then brand is the third and most important element of that triangle. But communicating between brand and design and front-end user experience is one thing. Communicating brand attributes and how they need to influence technology is another thing. Can you talk about how you solve that problem? How you tell your developers what sort of quality attributes a piece of software needs to have, how you teach them about brands so that they can build software that's really brand appropriate for your clients.
Okay. Anyone, please go ahead, Nick.
So that's a really important point, and I think that I think obviously it's all intertwined and one feeds into the other. I think that part of what we do at Fluid is when we start talking about those brand attributes, some of our clients have just really big, hard to understand brands. And so what we often do is wind up having a full brand investigation kind of brainstorming or kickoff meeting, and then we bubble up everything, and then we usually focus on a subset of what those brand attributes are, and it depends on what the project is. For a greenfield project where it's a one-off specialty item like RBK Custom, you're not going to want to roll the whole brand into one site. You want to take a subset, and Nike is one of these very large, very diffuse brands with a lot of attributes, and each one of their different websites are totally amazing because they very smartly winnow down to just the core things that are the most important to those core users. In terms of how that tactically gets baked into our design and our implementation and engineering process is, the answer's got several pieces. First of all, with us, just internal communication is critical on our teams. So every engineer the lead engineer at least on every project is involved in every single design review, so that there's a high degree of osmosis between the groups, between the different parts of the team as we go through our team meetings. And it also kind of sets the engineering expectations a lot. Likewise, whenever we have build reviews, the designers are always involved. And that means that our big review meetings tend to get a little bit large because we have an information architect, a visual designer, and an engineer. But for us, that's a critical part of our process. A very tactical example of that would be sometimes you don't need transitions for everything. Sometimes you do. Sometimes, because transitions are really important for persisting state and communicating to the user that they're going from one state to another. And it helps with immersion and all that other good stuff. But some brands shouldn't have any transitions because transitions, they take time. They could be 50 milliseconds, they could be 300 milliseconds, or 10 frames, however you count. But sometimes it's that immediacy of just going from state to state that can help underscore a brand attribute of immediacy or professionalism, especially for intranet applications is a great example. Like who likes to do expense reports? Anybody? So, do you have to really think about brand with the expense reports? No. But in understanding your users, if you're not selling anything, so it's hard you can't justify making the expense report process better by how much you're selling. But you can easily track, a metric of, compare the date on the receipt to when it was submitted. And if you see that go down, that means people are entering the receipts faster, and because the whole process is, might be less daunting. So we have a lot of these conversations about, this brand just doesn't underscore whatever method that we're entertaining. So let's ditch it, and that winds up going into design as well as implementation.
Anyone want to add anything?
I'd add just, our approach is very similar in that we have these complex conversations kind of ongoingly throughout the project. But a couple of things that help. We have 3 creative directors to choose from, basically. So we assign the most empathetic, the creative director that's most empathetic to that particular brand at the beginning. And then we work on small teams, but we switch people around to actually build the team that's most appropriate for each new engagement. And it's literally done on, based on personality and just kind of central understanding. I mean, the designers are the empathetic player on the team, and that's why they become brand stewards. It's because they sometimes, they take the role of carrying that torch, understanding that intimately, and then making sure that everyone stays on track. So, very tactically, we write an internal brief in response to whatever the client does that really, speaks to our own staff from the creative director down, and use that as kind of the measure throughout the project.
Yeah, I would have to add that with our clients, the technology is too often in the way. That unlike the audience for Reebok or Nike, we have a bunch of people just trying to get some information. Right now, we're doing Bloomberg.com, and the subscribers of Bloomberg, the proprietary Bloomberg service, are spending $1,400 a month to get that service. The last thing they want is any kind of clanking apparatus in front of them. They just want the spot price of, whatever the commodity is, they're trading in that second, and they don't want anything in the way. And so I think in our brand situation for the content media, which could be entertainment or news, there is the voice and personality of the brand. I mean, in some cases you have newspapers or networks that are trying to project a certain image throughout, like Fox. But in other cases, they're much more transparent. But the last thing they want, it's like the poor joker who's trying to work the damn remote control to get the TV to work. That's not what they want. And I think that one of the good things about this last round, like the WPF client stuff that you can do, is that you can suppress the technology quite a lot, and the brand comes up.
Let's move to a question from the other mic.
AJ, Kareem with Image Mark, a branded logo and apparel company. The big thing I wanted to get out of this session was learning a little bit more about your experience and getting the client to pay for services that they would like for their website. Everybody that we deal with wants Amazon.com but doesn't want to pay for it. So, what experience have you had, like Nathan with Timberland, when you went back to them with the JavaScript version of the boot, the shoemaker, and you made it into a thick client? What steps did the client come to you for that, or did you approach the client and give them this approach to benefit them?
Okay. Well, in that particular circumstance, the client came to us already knowing that they had an insanely high abandonment rate in the boot configuration and sales process. So people would hit the page, they'd change a couple of things, realize there had to be a round trip to the server to render the image and send it down. The technology was getting in the way, as Roger mentioned. And so they didn't know what to do about it. They knew it needed to be fixed. So that was one case in which they identified that a poor user experience was the central problem. We did some work for the Body Shop recently where they kind of had an inkling something was wrong with the whole checkout process, but they really weren't sure what it was. And that was a weird engagement because all we did was information architecture and process flows. We didn't do any visual design or even engineering, but it was a really interesting project because what we found was that there was this weird temporal and spatial disconnect between browsing for products and putting it in your cart. So the two were physically really separate. The two of them were kind of sequentially available at various times, and people, granted they were offline for about 3 weeks, but people like the Gap and Banana Republic, even for all the problems they had with that relaunch, they kind of figured that problem out in some interesting ways, where the shopping cart is absolutely persistent all the time. Yeah. And you can unfurl it and always put things in it, always check its status without forcing a page refresh.
Go down.
Yeah, I'd add to that. Nothing sells better than having a really great prototype that you can show people. It's more than just telling them what you're going to do or writing a functional spec or explaining what it is. But if you've got something that people can poke at and see how it works and play around with it, it makes the case for going back and actually realistically describe how much it's going to cost to get that. Makes a better case for being able to actually get the funding to do that.
And that's such a valid, an important point, because prototyping doesn't have to be long or expensive. And you know what? Sometimes it doesn't even need to be deeply interactive. We've done prototypes rendered in After Effects as linear QuickTime movies, just to get that point across. And prototyping early, even at a pitched stage, is a really invaluable tool for sure.
Great. The gentleman here.
This might be a sensitive or maybe not even appropriate question.
Oh, bring it on.
We like that.
But I want to talk about pricing models. And I have a gut feeling that a lot of you guys are probably more of a value-based pricing model. So I would like to know if you have any advice for, say, someone who is more of in a consultancy and an hourly-based model for doing things like ethnography. Like, how do you justify like the cost of ethnography when your client's basically watching the numbers go up?
Yeah, that's a great question. And similar to what Nathan was saying about prototyping, ethnography doesn't have to be a big thing. It can be as simple as going to a store for an afternoon and watching people while they're shopping, or going in and talking to the salespeople. So there's a lot of really quick and easy and cheap methods for going out and gathering that type of information and drawing insights from it. So we run into that a lot with clients where they see so much allocated to that research phase that they can't see the value of it. Once we've gone through that with them, it's pretty easy to sell it. So it's one thing that once a client has experienced that and seen the benefit of it, it's pretty easy to get that later on. But even if they aren't willing to pay for it, we still find a way to go out and do it anyways, because it is just so valuable.
This might actually help with the previous question as well. I'd recommend starting small. In like both of those cases, if you can go out and knock something out in a day with a good 2-day follow-up with like your internal team and a nice brief that you've written, the client, as soon as the client gets some value out of that, you may not have solved their entire problem, but you may have shown them the value in that work, and they tend to then ask for more. One way to address getting the client kind of over the hump, so to speak, when they can't buy off on your version of their website, the 50K or the 100K or the 500K version. They have a different idea in mind. Starting small would mean to actually volunteer to do the design process. What we do, well, we haven't done this in a long time simply because demand outpaces supply, but something I've used over the past 10 years is actually, if you disagree about the fact that final project is going to cost what you say it's going to cost, volunteer to do the design process for a third. And you're going to leave them with a design document, a little bit of a prototype, and guidelines to go forward. They can either recognize your value in that demonstration and choose to go on with you, or they can take that set of documents and go to the web shop down the street who's promising to do it for half and implement it with them. Now you just have to be comfortable with the fact that you're going to let a few of these people go, and they're going to go down the street. But most likely, given if your pricing is on target with your service, they're going to be happy with you and unhappy with the people who are undercutting you.
Yeah, I think pricing is entirely market-driven. It doesn't do a whole lot of good for me to price out according to time. It's really a question of what is the value in terms of the customer. I mean, how much can they make off of it versus what other people are charging. I think most of the web designers have driven down the price of design to a commodity level. And so I have to go about that to compete with in that environment. We've done two things. One thing, we tried to think faster. For example, on usability, 90% of our usability work is at the expert level, starting with Steve Krug, who wrote the book Don't Make Me Think. And he watches every step of the way that we design stuff, but we just pay him. It's just part of the design fee. And then if they want, for big clients, we'll do one-to-one usability lab testing, either at their place or at a third-party place. And that can be very expensive, but then it's priced out in advance. The second thing we do And there are other experts like that. Either they're specialists in animation or whatever they might do, or they're the coders, the people who are much better than our folks, than my resources in terms of particular kinds of technical skills. The other thing is we outsource 80% of our design work now to Mexico. And that way we can compete with the guy down the street who's like doing it for nothing.
And it's also important to also just always remind potential clients that user experience is a strategic differentiator and in their market segment. The map example I gave earlier is a perfect example of that kind of thing.
Yeah, my favorite story in my life of getting a fee to where I wanted it was to calculate how much money they were going to make on it, which I think in this case was $5 million. And I said, I'd do it for a tenth of that. And they like went pale. And then I said, all right, I'll do it for 200,000. And I was expecting 100 for it, and I got it. It was a good day.
No, if I'll just add something from the corporate side, it's the same question comes up about research when, it's not so much about the money, it's about the time to invest in research, Microsoft. And my experience has been the first time's the hardest to make the case, but the value becomes evident so quickly, right, that folks, whether they're clients or whether they're internal teams, they want more the next time around.
Yeah.
It's that the first time's the hurdle.
And those relationships with the same customers pay off for getting new customers.
Exactly. Go ahead, please.
Hi, I'm Linda Weinman from lynda.com and Flash Forward. I run one of the largest Flash user conferences in the world, or the largest. And so I'm, really thrilled to see Microsoft reaching out to designers and really excited to be here, excited to see this wonderful panel, to see a topic on user experience here. So first of all, kudos to Microsoft for sort of opening up to this universe, which is clearly very important. But I do have a question with all of you working on such high-profile projects. Do you think it's important for your customers for you to be authoring content that's cross-platform? That's my question.
Yes.
Yes.
I know it's a
Essential,
little politically
No.
charged.
No, yes.
No, it's not. Well, maybe it is, but
No, it's not.
the answer is absolutely. We want to, our brands want to leverage that investment in any way they can. We see the market, splitting up in many ways. And again, we're more focused not only just the desktop platform, but how our work then shows up on mobile phones and then shows up on interactive TV platforms. So we look at, when you say cross-platform, we're no longer thinking, Mac and PC. We're just assuming that all of that works. Now, we have made the decision a couple of times recently, even as I say this, I contradict myself, and every once in a while there's an economic decision that just says, leave that development behind, and we'll go back and pick it up later. And it's just sad, but true scenario for trailing platforms.
Yeah,
but we think it's an important effort, and it moves the entire market along.
I'd have to say it's been a while, I think, since we had the Mac versus PC or browser discussions with the client. More of the recent discussions have been more around different devices. So it's got to play on a TV. It's got to have a 10-foot UI. It's got to be on a portable media player. So I think that's a good thing. I think a lot of clients are recognizing that you want to reach everybody, and the way to do that is to make sure it runs on every platform.
I have a two-part response to that as well. I think that first of all, it also depends on context for the user and the end consumer of whatever it's whether it's a product or a service. And the North Face is a great example of not just that, but also my other point, which is that what part of what we're building has to be cross-platform. So, is it absolutely necessary that we have all customer experiences for the North Face built in Flash? That's less important than having a unified data source that can just pump data and content to whatever front-end experience, like Jay was talking about, on whatever platform. So if you can strategize on the back end for a really robust, very flexible and scalable system, then at that point it all becomes about the presentation layer. And in stores for the North Face, we have control over what that platform is going to be. Same thing if you're developing an intranet. You know what the platforms are going to be. And so you can make decisions to maybe pull up functionality in certain areas and have that acceptable trade-off of limiting the platform on which it can be deployed. I think obviously for a website, as everyone is saying, cross-platform issues should just be an assumption.
Well, so I'll even say, even in web development, we're no longer putting the entire 500 grand into the one URL, all under NikeSoccer.com. We're actually splitting up our development effort, and we're hiring and building blogs that are coordinated with the campaigns. We're building mini sites that catch people in different places. We're submitting content to YouTube and having that drive people back into this kind of torrent of activity that bounces from YouTube to MySpace to our mini page to our blog, and then they find themselves at some point, finding themselves at some point coming to Nike.com. So I point that out to say that it's no longer as painful a proposition to suggest that this campaign is going to have to roll out onto possibly 2 platforms. It's like, it's a dozen different efforts, combining technology and design and the campaign message to really be effective. So it's just no longer as painful a question.
Let's move on to the next question. Thank you.
I'm Shal Dhanaka from American Airlines, and I actually have a question, rather a concern. It's really good to see all these different technologies and how actually WPF can make such an interactive website and engage the user. And it will be great for companies like American Airlines and other travel industry folks to actually do something of that sort. However, the concern kind of comes in from the fact, how do you look into the web content accessibility for disabled users? Because that's one of the big concerns for a corporate like American, because you actually have a whole bunch of users coming and looking onto our website. We actually would have someone coming and playing around with the itinerary, looking into what's the possible deal, what's the seating arrangement, and so on. But at the same time, we keep getting dinged about the fact that our seating arrangements are not easily accessible for people who are blind or people with poor visibility. If they increase the font size, the whole page gets messed up.
Right. And
so those are the concerns. Have you all actually addressed those?
Yes. So I can start, and if any of you folks want to add to it. So that's actually a very strong part of the platform. Both the WCAG guidelines as well as Section 508, the platform with WPF and with Avalon. David, maybe you can help me in the audience because I'm using some of the internal code names, which may not translate into that. But accessibility is something that we think of is baked into the thinking on these platforms. Right? And I don't have a lot of first-hand knowledge personally in building with WPF yet, but I think Roger may in fact know more about it than I do.
I think exactly. I have a brother-in-law who is one of the most active people in my family on the web, and he's nearly blind. And so I'm always thinking, anytime I get into a big site, I think of him. And the great thing, and he has very limited vision, and he can zoom in and see stuff. The little templates that I showed show just 2 versions of the same text. I didn't mention that the text is also justified and is paragraph justification, so the typography is very smooth and easier to read. But also, you could make that window any size, or you could zoom up the text to any size, and following the same rules that you put into the templates, it will reflow. Now, you're going to have problems at American Airlines with the tabular matter when you run out of space at the end of the screen. That's going to be a problem. But you're just going to have to start scrolling sideways, which you can do. But the travel information and all of the other stuff that you have on the site, and I'm a customer, so I sort of use it a lot, will be much better in a WPF format. Now, whether that is a WPF downloadable client, you'll have to look into it. But I think that you'll find that that kind of accessibility will be better than any current platform.
Folks, we're out of time, and we'll be here for a few minutes if any of you want to come up and ask any questions, but I'm getting the signal from the back of the room saying time's
It's over?
up. Yes.
That was painless.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.